All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. The Silent War. Understanding and Overcoming Feminism's Hidden Impact on Society, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. The Solipsistic Shit Test, Slaying the Phantom Proletariat, Crushing the Decolonization Demon, and Starving the Surrogate Husband State to Restore the Patriarchy. Look at the world around you and dare to call it sane. You were promised a civilization built on reciprocal duty, a meritocratic ladder of competence, and the sacred protections of natural law. Yet you woke up to find yourself a tax slave in a genocentric dystopia where the state acts as a wealthy, weaponized surrogate husband, and your fatherhood is a revocable license. The etymology of virtue itself is the Latin virtus, derived from vir, meaning man. To be virtuous is literally to be manly. Yet the cultural Marxists have inverted this reality, conflating your biological competence with oppression, while they shriek about victimhood from the sterile, climate-controlled office buildings your sweat and blood forged. You are the Atlas who holds up the sky, mocked by the very parasites who would instantly starve if you shrugged. You are the net taxpayer, the only demographic in existence that pays more into the system over a lifetime than it extracts, funding a colossal maternal state that explicitly discriminates against you in the courts. The universities and the workplace, let us dissect the systemic rot with the cold, surgical steel of formal logic, beginning with a simple syllogism. Premise A just institution evaluates individuals based on merit, empirical reality, and equality under the law. Premise B, the modern genocentric state explicitly discriminates based on identity, elevates subjective feelings over empirical data, and tilts the legal scales via no-fault divorce and affirmative action. Conclusion, therefore, the modern state is fundamentally unjust and structurally hostile to the logos. Consider the empirical data that the Cathedral of Woke forbids you to speak. Men account for nearly 80% of all suicides, 93% of workplace fatalities, and are systematically rendered destitute by family courts operating on the presumption of male guilt. This is not a bug of the system, it is the feature. Feminism is simply Marxism wearing lipstick, a demonic ideology that replaced the economic proletariat with the female gender, weaponizing female hypergamy to justify the ruthless extraction of male resources. They have even weaponized her evolutionary biology against your mind. When she dyes her hair a fluorescent shade of chaos and acts overly distant, she is running a solipsistic shit test, demanding that your masculine logos validate her emotional hysteria. It is the biological ghost of the Pleistocene era, a desperate, unconscious plea to see if you are the tiger slayer or the simpering simp who will apologize for her neuroses. In the pages that follow, we are going to tear the mask off this satanic hydra of modernity. We will expose the Marxist revolutionary subject as a smokescreen for the systematic silencing of men. We will obliterate the historically illiterate demon of post-colonialism that demands you apologize for gifting the world sanitation, natural law, and the abolition of slavery. We will dissect the ruthless, opportunistic nature of the feminine imperative, And we will do it all using the most dangerous weapon known to the Marxist lie, the unadulterated, transcendent truth of the Western canon. You have been run over by a conspiracy of lies, but I am handing you the wheel. It is time to reclaim your heritage, master the trivium, and ruthlessly restore the patriarchal sanctuary of men. The phantom proletariat, Marxist revolutionary subject theory, and the systematic silencing of men. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had. Fitzgerald wrote that, and the irony is that he was describing the exact psychological manipulation the gynocentric order now deploys against every man who dares notice the obvious, that the entire apparatus of modern equality is a one-way racket designed to extract his labor while silencing his voice. I have spent years examining the institutional architecture of feminist ideology, and what I have found is not mere incompetence or accidental oversight. It is a deliberate, systematic campaign to declare women eternal victims and men eternal oppressors, regardless of what the empirical data actually shows. The United Nations He-for-She initiative stands as perhaps the most perfect emblem of this pathology. A global program that explicitly instructs men that their role in the gender equality project is to speak only in support of women, never about their own suffering. Imagine a hospital that only admits one sex. Imagine a courtroom that only recognizes one kind of victim. This is not justice, it is the inversion of justice. It is the Thomistic virtue of justice, giving each man his due, replaced with collective guilt. And collective guilt is the hallmark of every totalitarian regime that has ever disgraced the earth. The term marginalization demands our etymological scrutiny. It derives from the Latin margo, meaning border or edge. To marginalize someone is to push them to the periphery, to treat them as irrelevant to the center of civic life. Now apply this definition to the empirically verifiable facts of male existence in the modern West. Men constitute 93% of workplace fatalities. Men account for approximately 78% of suicides. Men are the overwhelming majority of the homeless population. Men are net taxpayers over their lifetimes. Women, taken in aggregate, are net recipients of state expenditure. Men built the infrastructure you drive on, the electrical grid that powers your devices, the sewage systems that prevent cholera, and the military apparatus that keeps the barbarians from the gates. To call such beings marginalized would be absurd enough, but the feminist machine has achieved something far more insidious. It has made the literal center of civilization, the sex that builds, maintains, and defends everything, believe it belongs at the margins. This is not accidental. This is linguistic terrorism, a grammar of psychological subjugation. Let us dissect the so-called wage gap with the cold steel of formal logic. The feminist claim asserts that women earn approximately 77 to 83 cents for every dollar a man earns, and that this disparity proves systemic discrimination. This is a textbook material fallacy of false cause, non causa pro causa. Premise 1. A disparity in aggregate earnings exists between men and women. Premise 2. This disparity correlates with sex. A conclusion. Therefore, the disparity is caused by discriminatory oppression. The conclusion does not follow from the premises. The syllogism fails because it ignores confounding variables that any honest statistician must account for. Hours worked, occupational choice, years of continuous employment, willingness to relocate, willingness to accept physical danger, and negotiation behavior. When economists control for these factors, the wage gap shrinks to statistical noise between 2 and 5%, which itself may reflect residual factors too complex to isolate. Women disproportionately choose sociology, education, and part-time work. Men disproportionately choose petroleum engineering, commercial fishing, and coal mining. Men account for virtually all workplace deaths. Equal pay for unequal work is not justice. It is the cry of the parasite demanding a seat at a table it did not build, did not provision, and does not maintain. The myth of patriarchy requires specific dismantling because it functions as the fundamental falsehood supporting the whole feminist ideology. The term originates from the Greek patriarches, meaning chief or father of a race, derived from pater, father, and archein, to rule. Feminist thinkers have distorted this into a conspiracy framework, where men operate as a unified oppressor class that constructed all societal structures to benefit themselves at women's expense. This concept collapses under several factual and rational criticisms. Primarily, it makes a compositional error. It presumes that since a minority of males possess authority, all males share in that authority. This is easily disproven. Males dominate the peak of society, true, yet they also fill the very lowest tiers. Trash collectors, sewage maintenance crews, roofers, oil rig roughnecks, the incarcerated frontline foot soldiers, and homeless veterans decaying beneath overpasses are not wealthy elites. These are expendable men destroyed by the exact mechanisms feminists label patriarchal. If a social hierarchy favors males as a group, why does it entomb so many at its foundation? The explanation is that this ranking is not based on sex, but rather on capability NL4, an organic order shaped by the necessity of shielding women and offspring from the brutal facts of physical survival. Female-centric societal norms demand the perks of the upper echelon while dismissing the suffering of the lower. It claims the executive suite without the subterranean mining shaft. Marxist revolutionary subject theory provides the intellectual genealogy of this pathology. Classical Marxism posited that the urban working class, the proletariat, would inevitably rise to overthrow the capitalist order. This prediction failed empirically because Western prosperity elevated the worker beyond the conditions that would make revolution rational. The working man in 1950s America owned a house, a car, and a television. He had no desire to burn down the system that fed his family. The cultural Marxists of the Frankfurt School, refusing to accept the supremacy of free markets and natural hierarchy, shifted their target. If the worker would not revolt, they reasoned, then another group must be found, some class that could be convinced of its oppression and mobilized against the civilizational order. They selected woman. They declared her the new revolutionary subject, invented a phantom patriarchy to justify perpetual warfare against male authority, and set about systematically destroying the nuclear family, which Friedrich Engels had explicitly identified as the primary obstacle to state control in his 1884 work. The Origin of the Family, Private Property in the State. The pattern is unmistakable. The left always requires a victim class, a villain class, and a revolutionary vanguard. In the current iteration, women are the victims, men are the villains, and the state is the vanguard. The state has become what Esther Vilar identified decades ago, a surrogate husband. By eroding the patriarchal family unit through no-fault divorce, welfare expansion, and the systematic demonization of male authority, the state usurped the husband's role as provider and protector. Feminism did not liberate women. It merely transferred female dependency from the individual man who earned his authority through sacrifice, provision, and the assumption of mortal risk to the collective state, which funds itself by extorting men through taxation and family court. The welfare state is Marxism wearing the mask of maternal care. Consider the mechanics. A man marries, fathers children, and then his wife initiates divorce. Women initiate approximately 70% of divorces. The family court strips him of his children, his home, and a third or more of his future income. The state then provides his ex-wife with welfare benefits, child support enforcement, and preferential treatment in housing and employment, all funded by the taxes of other men. The man becomes a resource extraction unit, a beast of burden harnessed to a machine that despises him. This is not equality. This is feudalism rebranded as compassion. The statistics on male suffering are not marginal. They are catastrophic. In the United Kingdom, suicide is the leading cause of death for men under 50. In the United States, the male suicide rate is approximately 4 times the female rate. Boys are falling behind in education at every level. Women now constitute approximately 60% of university graduates. Family courts award maternal custody in the overwhelming majority of disputed cases. Male victims of domestic violence are routinely arrested rather than helped. Thanks to mandatory arrest policies and Duluth Model protocols that assume male perpetration and female victimhood as a matter of ideological doctrine. A man who calls the police to report that his female partner has assaulted him is more likely to be arrested himself than to receive protection. This is not a bug in the system, it is a feature. It is the intended outcome of ideological frameworks that deny female agency and male victimhood as a matter of first principles. I propose the following syllogism of systemic censorship. Premise 1. Institutions that establish gender policies claim to do so on the basis of equality and objective data. Premise 2. These same institutions systematically exclude male voices and refuse to acknowledge empirically verified male disadvantages, suicide rates, educational collapse, workplace fatalities, family court bias, false accusation rates, and the near total absence of male-specific health funding. Conclusion: therefore, these institutions are not built on equality or data, but on an anti-male gynocentric supremacy that cannot survive dialectic scrutiny. The logic is devastating precisely because it is simple. The institutions will not debate you because they cannot debate you. They will not acknowledge male suffering because to do so would collapse the entire victim narrative upon which their funding, their power, and their identity depend. The remedy is the Catholic principle of subsidiarity, the doctrine that social and political issues must be handled at the most immediate local level consistent with their resolution. Subsidiarity begins with the father as head of the family. The state has no competence to intervene in the domestic sphere, no legitimate authority to redefine marriage, no moral right to separate children from their fathers. The family is the first institution, the primordial civil society association, and it precedes the state in both ontological dignity and temporal authority. The state exists to serve the family, not to consume it. True freedom requires ripping the alienating machinery of the feminist state out of the home, restoring paternal authority, and rebuilding the institutions of civil society from the ground up. Fathers teaching sons, men associating freely in male-only spaces. Competence determining status rather than identity politics and the virtues of the Western canon. Courage, justice, prudence, temperance, serving as the measure of a man. The red-pilled man must starve the beast. If universities have become re-education camps for feminist ideology, withdraw your sons and your funding. If corporations demand diversity training that pathologizes masculinity as toxic, withdraw your labor and your talent. If political parties treat men as expendable voting blocks to be taxed and ignored, withdraw your consent. Let the diversity hires build the bridges. Let the gender studies graduates code the software. Let the feminists manage the supply chains. Withdraw your logos from institutions that hate you and watch them collapse under the weight of their own incompetence. This is not revenge. It is the natural consequence of building systems on lies. Reality does not negotiate. Gravity does not care about your feelings. And the civilization that men built, the greatest cultures in the known history of the species, will not be sustained by people who believe that arithmetic is patriarchal and that biological sex is a social construct. I am not asking you to be angry, though anger is the appropriate rational response to betrayal. I am asking you to see clearly, to look with unflinching gaze upon the machinery of your own dispossession, and to name it for what it is. The phantom proletariat is you. The revolutionary subject was manufactured from your silence. The system feeds on your willingness to accept the frame that you are the problem. You are not the problem, you are the foundation. You are the load-bearing wall of everything that stands between civilization and the abyss. And the moment you stop apologizing for existing, the moment you withdraw your consent from the institutions that seek your destruction, the moment you reclaim your authority as a man, a father, a builder, and a bearer of the Logos, that is the moment the silent war ends and the West begins to live again. As I gaze upon the modern feminized state, a pathetic parasitic leviathan demanding male submission while violently expelling our Logos, I recognize the exact same spiritual rot fueling the demonic crusade of decolonization. The cultural Marxists, having successfully weaponized female hypergamy and state violence to dismantle the patriarchal family, now aim their gamma resentment squarely at the blood-soaked altar of Western history. They demand that rational men internalize a false gynocentric guilt, commanding us to accept the absurd premise that European man is the singular villain of human history rather than its supreme liberator. I resolutely refuse to bow to this satanic inversion of reality. To defeat this anti-logos pathology, we must drag the historical truth of our ancestors into the light, unseating the cold steel of objective fact to obliterate the Marxist fiction that Western civilization was built on universal exploitation rather than unparalleled sacrifice. The decolonization demon, post-colonialism, the erasure of European identity, and the war on logos. Between the years 1807 and 1860, the British Royal Navy's West Africa Squadron seized over 1,600 slave ships and freed 150,000 Africans, losing thousands of their own British sailors to disease and combat in the process. Across the Atlantic, over 600,000 Western men died in the crucible of the American Civil War to extinguish the institution of chattel slavery. Western civilization did not invent slavery. It inherited a universal, brutal, and globally practiced human institution, and it uniquely sacrificed a generation of its own sons to end it. Yet, the demonic specter of post-colonialism demands that modern men prostrate themselves in eternal guilt. Let us define our terms using the cold steel of etymology. The word colony derives from the Latin colere, meaning to till, to cultivate, or to worship. To colonize is to bring the plow to the wasteland, to impose order upon the chaotic mud of superstition and tribal brutality. To decolonize is not a noble liberation. It is a deliberate, satanic reversion of the cultivated field back into barren dirt. It is a mental virus that commands the civilized architect to apologize for building the house that shelters the ungrateful tenant. The vanguard of this post-colonial rot explicitly targets the transcendentals, the true, the good, and the beautiful, sneering that they are mere Western constructs utilized to oppress the noble savage. This is epistemological suicide, a self-refuting garbage fire that collapses under the weight of its own internal contradictions. Watch how easily the illusion falls apart when pressed against the anvil of formal logic. Premise A. The postmodernist claims that objective truth is a myth, and that all epistemological frameworks are merely culturally constructed instruments of power. Premise B. The postmodernist asserts that their own critique of Western power is objectively true and universally valid across all cultures. Conclusion. Therefore, the postmodernist foundational premise is a demonstrable lie, as they must commandeer the very objective truth they deny to peddle their resentful fictions. They use the rigorous logical frameworks of the West, the dialectic, the free press, the academic freedom birthed by the Magna Carta and the university system, to argue that rigorous logic, freedom, and academic inquiry are inherently oppressive. It is the intellectual equivalent of using a perfectly calibrated German microscope to declare that microscopes do not exist. Why do they do it? Why do the pink-haired harpies and the soft-handed academic gamma males shriek for the decolonization of the curriculum? It is driven entirely by gamma bias, the seething psychological resentment of lesser men and ideological women who lack the intellectual rigor to achieve mastery over the Western canon. Look at the biological reality of the university system today. Unable to write a symphony, lacking the spatial reasoning to engineer a flying buttress, and entirely unequipped to formulate a valid syllogism, these midwits seek to destroy the very concept of objective mastery. If they cannot scale the mountain of Western achievement, they will declare the mountain evil and attempt to bulldoze it into a flat, equitable plane of mediocrity. They resent the logos because the logos demands discipline, hierarchy, and competence. The feminine imperative, unchecked by masculine reason, defaults to hypergamy and the safety of the herd, lowering the bar to the lowest common denominator so that no feelings are hurt. Even as the civilization crumbles into ash, when you watch the mob topple a statue of a founding father or deface a classical monument, do not make the mistake of viewing this as mere political protest. It is a literal iconoclasm rooted in spiritual warfare. In the Orthodox and Catholic cosmological schema, matter is sanctified by the logos. Stone and bronze are shaped by human hands to transmit the virtues of the dead to the living, to ensure the generational transmission of culture. The iconoclast does not merely hate stone. He hates the reality the stone represents. Satan cannot create. He can only mock and destroy. The vandalization of European art is the work of the anti-logos, a demonic attempt to sever the biological and spiritual bloodline of Western man. If they can erase your ancestors, they can erase your inheritance. If they can make you hate the men who built the very streets you walk upon, they can strip you of your identity and leave you defenseless. This systematic erasure of European identity goes hand in hand with the complete feminization of statecraft and foreign policy. A masculine state acts with sovereignty, drawing lines in the sand, enforcing borders, and protecting its citizens with the sword of justice. A feminized state, saturated by gynocentrism and the toxic maternal instinct of the left, seeks consensus with bad actors and throws open its gates to invasion. Look at the open border policies of the modern West. It is the hyper-empathy of the dysfunctional mother run amok, sacrificing the safety and resources of her own children, the native-born citizens, to appease the aggressive outsider who seeks to plunder the household. Compassion without boundary is suicidal weakness. A nation that refuses to defend its borders is a woman who refuses to lock her door at night, calling the invader a guest out of sheer cowardice. The antidote to this cultural erasure is the aggressive re-indoctrination into the Western apprenticeship mastery ladder. We must strip the soft, therapeutic language from our institutions and replace it with the rigorous vocabulary of excellence. Young men must be taught Latin and Greek, forced to memorize classical rhetoric, and immersed in the unfiltered, blood-soaked, glorious history of their ancestors. We must make them fluent in the language of their own greatness, teaching them that rights are not granted by a paternalistic state, but are secured by the blood of men willing to die for the natural law. You must refuse the frame of collective guilt. When the left demands you apologize for the sins of your forefathers, you must laugh in their faces. Speak the truth with the gravity of an ancient Roman senator. Western civilization is the light of the world, and it is the duty of every rational man to defend its borders, its culture, and its bloodline. Never apologize for the greatest engine of human flourishing the universe has ever witnessed. Let me offer you a diagnostic tool, a lens ground in the fires of unflinching realism. If you wish to comprehend the true nature of the feminine imperative, you must abandon the feminist fairy tales and observe what women do when unconstrained by the traditions of the West. The modern world has furnished us with a laboratory of ruthless clarity, a digital coliseum where the mask of feminine empathy slips and the biological machinery beneath grinds forward without pity. The solipsistic shit test, female emotionalism, hypergamy, and the illusion of noticing. If you want to witness the raw, unvarnished cruelty of female nature, stop listening to what women say and look at what they do. Open any modern dating application, that digital meat market where the thin veneer of romanticism is stripped away to reveal the cold, biological calculus of the feminine imperative. The empirical data is unassailable. Studies of these platforms consistently show that women rate a staggering 80% of men as below average in attractiveness, a statistical impossibility that exposes a collective solipsism completely detached from objective reality. The top 10% to 20% of men receive the vast, overwhelming majority of female attention, while the bottom 50% of men are virtually invisible, left to rot in a digital wasteland of unanswered messages. This is not a failure of the system. This is hypergamy operating without the historically necessary constraints of Western civilization, natural law, and monogamous virtue. It exposes the grotesque lie of innate female empathy, confirming instead a ruthless, opportunistic drive to monopolize the highest genetic and material value while utterly dismissing the disposable majority of men. To understand this biological tyranny, we must establish rigorous definitions. Let us apply the first stage of the trivium. Grammar. Solipsism derives from the Latin solus ipse, meaning self alone. It is the neurotic, pathological belief that nothing exists outside one's own mind and immediate emotional experience. It is the defining psychological trait of the modern female. Hypergamy is the evolutionary drive to mate with a man of superior status, resources, and competence. When you synthesize solipsism and hypergamy, you forge a psychological weapon of mass destruction deployed against uninitiated blue-pilled men. She does not see you as a human being with intrinsic dignity. She sees you as a utility, an asset to be acquired or discarded based entirely on your capacity to elevate her status and soothe her internal chaos. Consider the feminist indoctrinated woman who radically alters her appearance, dyeing her hair neon pink, disfiguring her flesh with chaotic scribbles of tattoos, or wearing hypersexualized clothing to signal her liberation. When she demands of her boyfriend or orbiters, do you notice? She is not seeking a genuine exchange of objective truth. She is executing a narcissistic shit test. She is demanding that the masculine logos validate her chaotic, pathos-driven self-destruction. The correct, rational response is not to validate her delusion, but to recognize the ontological disorder. When a woman desecrates her own form, she rebels against the transcendental of beauty. To praise her self-mutilation is to participate in her rebellion against reality itself. This behavior is not a product of modern social conditioning. It is rooted deep in the harsh crucible of our evolutionary biology. During the Pleistocene epoch, a woman's survival depended entirely on her ability to secure a mate who could stare down a saber-toothed tiger without flinching. Fast forward to the modern era, when a woman throws a hysterical, theatrical tantrum over a manufactured misogynistic microaggression, she is unconsciously probing your character. She is biologically desperate to know if you are the man who will stand unyielding against the beast, or if you are a sniveling simp who will cower and apologize for the tiger's aggression. She creates irrational emotional chaos to test your emotional stability. Do not fail this test. Do not bow to the hysteria. The blue-pilled simp, thoroughly brainwashed by the toxins of cultural Marxism, apologizes when his woman acts insane, thereby rewarding her dysfunction. The red-pilled man operates on a higher principle, stoic affect. He separates tangible harm from fleeting emotional offense. He looks at her artificial emotional explosion with the detached, rational amusement of an adult. Watching a toddler scream for a candy bar in the middle of a grocery store, you do not negotiate with the toddler. You do not validate the delusion. You set the ironclad boundary of masculine sovereignty. You hold your frame with the discipline of a stoic philosopher, because logic dictates that reality is not subject to the whims of feminine emotionalism. When a woman realizes her overt hysteria isn't working, she pivots to the dialectic of acting overly distant. The silent treatment is not a mere passing mood. It is a deliberate tactic of emotional terrorism. It is the calculated withholding of affection specifically designed to induce anxiety, panic, and compliance in a man. This behavior violently violates the cardinal virtues of temperance and justice. She weaponizes the feminine capacity for relationship into a tool of petty, tyrannical manipulation. The uninitiated man chases her, begging for forgiveness, thereby handing over his agency and self-respect. This is the exact moment of his spiritual death. The solution is the rhetorical sword of unshakable masculine frame. The next time a woman acts distant or demands pathetic validation for her superficial, destructive changes, do not chase her, do not simp her. The instant you stop fearing her walking away, she will stop walking. Respect from a woman is only earned and biologically sustained through your absolute, uncompromising masculine sovereignty. She wants a man she cannot control. If she can control you through the mere threat of her absence, she will despise you for it. Let us encapsulate this dynamic through the undeniable clarity of formal logic, the second stage of the trivium. Premise A. Women are biologically programmed to seek a mate who can protect them from physical and social threats. Premise B. A woman unconsciously tests a man's emotional stability by creating irrational emotional chaos. Conclusion. Therefore, a man who yields to a woman's emotional chaos fails the biological test, proves himself weak, and inevitably destroys her sexual attraction to him. The logic is irrefutable. If you yield to the shit test, you destroy the very attraction you are trying to preserve. Ultimately, we must understand this struggle in the context of cosmic theology. In the cosmological schema of natural law, the masculine represents the logos, the active, ordering, rational principle that brings structure out of chaos. The feminine is the receptive material, the castle that requires a foundation. When the feminine demands to lead, when feminism insists on matriarchy, it is an ontological inversion of natural law, a rebellion against the logos itself, echoing all the way back to the fall of Lucifer. The man must never apologize for leading. Leadership is not tyranny. It is the ultimate masculine sacrifice, bearing the heavy burden of civilizational order so that the feminine can flourish in its proper receptive state. Reclaim your birthright, master your emotional world, and never bow to the solipsistic tyranny of the shit test. But this surrender of masculine frame does not merely poison the private sphere, it metastasizes into the public square, rotting the structural foundations of civilization itself. I tell you this, when a man yields his logos to feminine emotional terrorism in the bedroom, he capitulates to the macrocosm of the gynocentric state, allowing the solipsistic tantrum of an entitled woman to be weaponized into the coercive apparatus of government. By abdicating our divine duty to master the feminine, we have allowed cultural Marxists to replace the paternal principle of just rule with the maternal state's tyrannical safetyism, setting the stage for a systematic war against the very men who built reality. The restoration of the patriarch, rebuilding the mastery ladder and the sanctuary of men. Consider the terminal velocity of a civilization that actively dismantles its own load-bearing pillars. From the foundational logic of the CTMU, reality is a self-processing language of logos, a syntactic structuring of truth that demands active conscious agency to be actualized. Men are the primary architects of this reality. Without male agency, the teleological drive to conquer the wild, forge iron from ore, and string power lines across continents, infrastructure collapses, supply chains evaporate, and humanity regresses to the mud. Yet, we are ruled by a maternal state that treats this masculine agency as a pathology. Let us define our terms rigorously, as grammar is the first weapon of the wise. Patriarchy derives from the Latin pater, father, and the Greek archein, to rule or begin. It is the rule of the father, the principle of paternal provision and boundary enforcement. The toxic femininity of the left has perverted this into a bogeyman, but the empirical data is undeniable. Men are the only net lifetime taxpayers, footing the bill for a bloated, gynocentric welfare state. While comprising 93% of workplace fatalities, we are the atlas holding up the sky, told by Lilliputians that our sweat and shattered bones are oppressive. This inversion of reality is codified in the demonic dogma of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let us dissect this cultural Marxist pathology using the Thomistic definition of justice, which dictates merit proportional to action. Let us construct a syllogism to expose this lie. Major premise: justice is the proportional distribution of honor and resources based on objective merit and competence. Minor premise: DEI explicitly mandates the redistribution of resources and opportunities away from competence toward immutable, victim class identities. Conclusion: therefore, DEI is the formal, structural instantiation of injustice. It is a material heresy against the natural law. The answer to this degeneracy is not to whine, but to ruthlessly mock, bypass, and outcompete this ideological monoculture. Excellence is our weapon. We must build the systems that actually work, bridges that do not collapse, code that does not fail, and businesses that actually produce, and let the diversity hires drown in the bureaucratic quicksand of their own making. To forge this excellence, we must reclaim the sanctuary of men. The cultural Marxists have infiltrated and destroyed male-only spaces, the gentlemen's clubs, the military units, the fraternal orders, because the feminine imperative despises any arena where it cannot exercise its manipulative emotional leverage. A space governed entirely by men breeds competence, stoic loyalty, and an absolute immunity to the state's therapeutic emotionalism. The left understands that men who operate outside the gynocentric matrix are a threat. Therefore, our first act of restoration is to ruthlessly establish new, impregnable male-only spaces. We must cultivate the ver sacrum, the ancient italic rite of the sacred spring, where men go to the frontier to build anew, completely free from the suffocating hysteria of female emotionalism and state surveillance. Within these sacred spaces, we must resurrect the apprenticeship mastery ladder and abandon the degenerate, feminized public education system. Consider the etymology of education, from the Latin educere, to lead out or draw forth. Modern schooling does exactly the opposite. It domesticates. It is an estrogen-drenched daycare built to reward female compliance. The ability to sit still and parrot back the teacher's socialist platitudes while drugging the masculine genius for risk-taking with Ritalin. We must replace this factory of slaves with the ancient guild model, older, competent men initiating boys through voluntary hardship and the transmission of practical skills. A boy becomes a man not by having his feelings validated, but by mastering a craft, proving his utility, and claiming his rightful place on the competency ladder. This mastery of the physical world is not merely a biological function. It is an act of profound spiritual warfare. Look at the facts. Feminists screech that the provider role is a capitalist trap, yet the true nature of women reveals a hilarious hypocrisy. Women initiate roughly 70% of divorces, frequently weaponizing family courts, a system built on Marxist leniency and female victimhood to extract resources from men, turning the state into a surrogate husband. This is cuckoldry at the societal scale, but we reclaim the narrative through the sacred masculine vocation of the provider. Work is not oppression, it is the logos embodied. When a man provides for his family, he is participating in the divine order. Work, from the Greek ergon, is an act of worship, a sacrifice of the self to build a legacy that outlasts one's own physical body. We must ground this restoration in the unapologetic, robust cosmology of Christendom. Christendom was not a historical accident, it was the institutionalization of the logos on earth, recognizing the fallen nature of man, the reality of evil, and the necessity of male sacrifice. The soft, effeminate churchianity of today, which preaches submission to feminist dogma and weeps over victimhood, is a betrayal of the cross. True theology recognizes that the masculine state protects the strong so they may defend the weak. The feminine maternal state empowers the weak to destroy the strong, resulting in the ruin of all. Let us apply formal logic to the architecture of the state. Premise: A, men possess inherent agency and the divine, pre-political right to protect their families. Premise B: the modern welfare state explicitly seeks to replace the father by financially incentivizing female independence, effectively subsidizing the fracturing of the family. Conclusion: therefore, the rational man must actively dismantle the state's power by building parallel economies that operate entirely outside the gynocentric tax farm. The final call is absolute. Do not go into the dark. Go your own way, but build, forge iron, master the trivium, speak the truth with a tongue of fire, form the underground guilds, the unbreakable brotherhoods of competence. Become the men that women secretly desire and the state deeply fears. Restore the West or watch it burn. Either way, do not yield an inch to the lies of the serpent. Look at the absolute state of the world around you and realize that you have been sold a diabolical lie. Build as a transcendent truth. You have been conditioned by institutional rot to view your own natural, logos-driven masculinity as an original sin, while the gynocentric state extracts your labor to fund its insatiable welfare apparatus. Let us deploy a simple, inescapable syllogism to cauterize this psychic wound. Major premise: a just institution adjudicates reality through empirical merit and objective natural law. Minor premise: the modern gynocentric state explicitly penalizes male competence while rewarding female solipsism and Marxist victimhood through systemic quotas, no-fault divorce theft, and kangaroo family courts. Conclusion: therefore, the modern state is fundamentally unjust and holds zero moral authority over any sovereign, rational man. You are not a failure, you are the scapegoat for a dying, decadent empire that feeds on the blood and taxes of its disposable men, while weaponizing the very women you are biologically programmed to protect. Consider the grotesque comedy of the modern sexual marketplace, where a woman artificially inflates her perceived value with cosmetics and state-sponsored affirmative action, only to act distant and demand you chase her like a starving dog. She does this because she is biologically driven by hypergamy, unconsciously begging you to pass the shit test by holding your frame and asserting your unshakable dominance. When she throws a tantrum, alters her appearance to seek validation, or parrots the brain-dead slogans of critical theory, she is pleading for the patriarch, the strong, stoic, immovable architect of reality. By refusing to validate her emotional terrorism, you cease being a pawn in her hypergamous solipsism and reclaim your divine telos. You are no longer bound by the false guilt of the post-colonial, anti-Western agitators who demand you apologize for the unparalleled genius of your ancestors. Never apologize for the civilization that eradicated global slavery, mapped the physical stars, and erected the soaring cathedrals of human spirit. The feminine imperative has infected the state, turning governance into a giant, heavily subsidized safe space that punishes male excellence and subsidizes female recklessness. Your redemption begins the exact microsecond you permanently withdraw your consent from this gynocentric matrix. You do not negotiate with an ideological parasite that demands your demographic erasure. You aggressively starve it of your irreplaceable competence. If the universities and corporate HR departments demand you grovel before the pathetic demons of DEI, you must ruthlessly build parallel institutions grounded in the unyielding mastery ladder of the Western canon. Seek the ancient, rugged brotherhoods of men who speak the truth without a stammer. Master a physical or intellectual skill that is totally immune to the diversity higher. Forge iron, write flawless code, build the literal logistical infrastructure that keeps the lights on and the food cold. Your labor is not a curse. It is your sacred masculine offering to the transcendent good. You are the inheritors of a warrior caste forged in the fires of natural law, and it is your absolute, non-negotiable duty to reclaim your sovereignty. The spell of blue-pilled ignorance is permanently shattered. The shadows on the cave wall are exposed as pathetic feminist projections, and the blinding light of objective reality is yours to command. Stand tall, speak the truth with a tongue of fire. Claim your undisputed birthright, and let the soft, effeminate modern world tremble before the disciplined, awakened man. And now the sponsored book introduction, The Silent War. Understanding and Overcoming Feminism's Hidden Impact on Society. Men don't cry, we act. But let me tell you, when the court stripped me of my home, my savings, and weekends with my daughter because a no-fault divorce decree declared my ex-wife's feelings more valuable than my labor, I damn near broke that rule. That was the moment I realized the system isn't broken. It's rigged. Feminism didn't free women. It enslaved men. If you've ever been called toxic for defending your boundaries, drained by alimony payments to an ex who ghosted her vows, or watched your son expelled over a baseless campus accusation, this book is your artillery. This isn't a therapy session for soy boys clutching lattes. It's a war manual for men ready to reclaim their sovereignty. You'll learn how to dodge the marriage plantation's financial traps, dismantle Title IX kangaroo courts, and bypass the media's beta brainwashing. We'll dissect the Duluth Model's lies that paint male anger as abuse, while female violence gets a hall pass. You'll see hard data. 97% of alimony slaves are men. 90% lose custody battles, and 5 to 10% of rape claims are proven false. Yet the accused get zero due process. Evolution doesn't care about your therapist's pronouns. Women's hypergamy and dual mating strategies haven't vanished because a hashtag demanded equality. Biology isn't bigoted, it's factual. While blue-haired activists screech about toxic masculinity, they still crave stoic leaders who fix their Wi-Fi and pay their bills. This book isn't for simps funding OnlyFans thoughts or white knights virtue signaling on Twitter. If you're content being feminism's ATM, close this now and go binge Netflix. But if you're done with the guilt trips, false accusations, and financial castration, let's rebuild from MGTOW strategies to legal counterstrikes against false DV. Claims the silent war equips you with red-pilled truths and tactical playbooks. You'll join a brotherhood of 500,000 plus men weaponizing evolutionary psychology, stoic philosophy, and constitutional rights to dismantle genocracy. Your DNA demands dominance. It's time to answer. The Silent War: Understanding and Overcoming Feminism's Hidden Impact on Society. Written by Conrad Reicher. Buy now. Links in description.